Because I think that's probably one of the greatest decisions in the history of Hollywood.
I hadn't ever imagined that I could be involved in something like this.
The first Iron Man was so definitive and kind of game-changing. I had hypnotized myself into such a state of confidence that I was certain that everything we were doing worked. And the rest is history.
Soy Iron Man.
You know, it's just such a sweet time to be with this group of men and women who get to do this, you know?
How's it going, Hef?
This gentleman was born to play Tony Stark, and the way he looks is exactly the way I pictured him. We are so lucky to have Robert Downey Jr. playing this role. I was born under a lucky star, I gotta tell you.
So everybody sort of knew who he was, and I remember sitting down with the guy, and I was like, geez, he just got it in it. He's got that spark in him and his eye, and he's ready. And that's when we were in your office and we were pointing to his headshot and saying, we got to try to figure this out.
Yeah.
That was enough to get us a screen test.
Oh boy, let me guess. Berkeley? Ms.
Truth is,
I am Iron Man.
May I have some triumphant music, please? I am Iron Man, and this is for the people.
Marvel was betting its future on Iron Man, and its best choice for Tony Stark was an actor Hollywood considered nearly uninsurable. Robert Downey Jr. had already lost his career and his freedom. So why did that history make audiences trust him more, not less? Robert Downey Jr. was born in New York City in 1965 to a filmmaker father and an actress mother. He was on film sets before he understood what a film set even was. At 5, his own dad cast him in a movie, playing a sick puppy.
A tornado scared me so much it made my hair disappear.
Have any hair on your balls?
By his 20s, he was fast talker, faster thinker, always a step ahead of whoever shared the scene with him. That speed wasn't just charisma. Sometimes it worked like armor. Here's the clearest proof. When Downey was cast as Charlie Chaplin, he was only 25. The film arrived in 1992. To prepare, he learned to play violin and tennis left-handed since Chaplin favored his left hand. He worked with movement coaches for months, drilling pratfalls and posture until they became automatic. That performance earned him his first Oscar nomination.
Best Actor nominee for his brilliant work in Chaplin, Robert Downey Jr.
Downey played Chaplin as someone who performed joy in public while carrying sadness underneath it. That same balance would appear throughout his career. Confidence stayed on the surface. Insecurity remained just underneath, including in a role he hadn't been cast in yet. Watch it closely, and you can already see Tony Stark, 16 years early. The arrogance sitting right next to real vulnerability. The playfulness that turns serious in half a second. That kind of talent can convince a person they're untouchable, that no matter what happens, they'll always be clever enough to talk their way out of it. For a while, that belief looked true. Downey was gifted, he was funny, he was heading toward becoming one of the greats. That trajectory made his later collapse even harder to watch, because everyone could see exactly what was being wasted. But talent has a dangerous side effect. It can make being smart feel the same as being safe. Eventually, even his charm stopped protecting him. Here's the part of the story that explains why his charm was built that way in the first place. His father, Robert Downey Sr., battled his own addiction for 15 years. In that house, drugs weren't hidden. They were just part of the furniture. When Robert was 6, sitting in on a poker game, he reached for a glass of wine. Instead of stopping him, his father handed him a joint. "You ought to try a little of this," he said. In the documentary Senior, Downey later said the pattern had become a full addiction by the time he was 8. He once described what it felt like using drugs alongside his own father. He said it was his dad trying to say "I love you" in the only language the man actually knew. That's not a childhood. That's a trap wearing the costume of a Bond. By the mid-90s, the charm wasn't covering it anymore. In June of 1996, police pulled him over for speeding. Inside his truck, heroin, cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum. He was arrested on felony charges. Weeks later, he wandered into a stranger's house and fell asleep in a child's bed. The family didn't press charges, they just wanted him gone. Stories like that became tabloid fixtures, turning his addiction into a running joke instead of a warning sign. He went to rehab. He walked out early. He missed his court-ordered drug tests again and again until a judge ran out of patience. In 1999, that judge sentenced him to 3 years in a California state prison. Downey served about a year before his release. Here's the part people forget. This wasn't a man being punished for one mistake. This was an Oscar nominee, and none of that talent could undo what he'd done to himself or to the people around him. The frustrating part was that his talent never actually disappeared. He could still deliver a great performance when he showed up. The problem was, nobody could count on the showing up part. Every comeback attempt got followed by another headline, and eventually, the risk mattered more than the talent. It's tempting to say Robert Downey Jr. basically was Tony Stark. Brilliant, arrogant, self-destructive. But that comparison lets him off too easy. Downey never built a weapons company. He never flew in a metal suit. What he understood, in his own bones, was harder to fake. The denial, the fear underneath the jokes, the exhausting performance of pretending everything's fine when it clearly isn't. In 2001, while on parole, he was found impaired in a Culver City alley. That single incident got him written off the show Ally McBeal. It happened right after the role had won him a Golden Globe.
And here are the nominees for Best Supporting Actor in a Series, Miniseries, or TV Movie. Robert Downey Jr., Ally McBeal.
At that point, the question wasn't whether Robert Downey Jr. could give a great performance. It was whether Hollywood would ever let him try again. If you've ever bet on yourself when nobody else would, hit like right here and subscribe to the channel. This next part is for you. Tony Stark gets trapped in a cave, forced to look at exactly what he'd built and who it hurt.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
Robert Downey Jr.'s cave wasn't that cinematic. There was no dramatic escape scene, just the slow, humiliating work of proving change through behavior, one decision at a time. And here's the uncomfortable part about second chances. Getting better on the inside doesn't automatically make the outside world believe you. Studios remembered exactly who he used to be long after he'd stopped being that person. In 2003, he got sober for good. That same year, on the set of Gothica, he met a producer named Susan Levin. She turned him down twice before they started dating. She made one condition clear from the start. His sobriety wasn't up for discussion. Sobriety alone didn't reopen doors, though. Studios still viewed him as an insurance risk. Without a bond backing him, meaningful feature work was nearly impossible to land. That's when his old friend Mel Gibson stepped in. Gibson had been developing a film called The Singing Detective, intending to star in it himself. Instead, he handed the lead role to Downey and personally paid his insurance bond out of his own pocket.
No, wait. That's murder.
We get a load of that? Murder, he says. I call it.
If Downey messed up, Gibson was the one on the hook for it. The film came out in 2003. It barely registered at the box office, but commercially, that wasn't the point. It proved Downey could complete a production without incident. That's the ladder he had to climb. Small roles, proof of reliability, one project convincing the next producer to take a slightly bigger risk. Films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and Zodiac followed, small but steady proof that he could finish what he started.
Where is she? Where the fuck is Harmony?
Harry.
You want to play hardball? I can do that. Where is the girl?
Does anyone ever call me names?
You mean like retard?
Yeah.
Rebuilding trust didn't look glamorous. Every small role became a test nobody announced out loud. Producers watched whether he showed up on time, whether he knew his lines, whether he made it through a full shoot without incident. Nobody was grading his talent anymore. That part had never been in question. They were grading his dependability, one ordinary workday at a time. Reliability could get Downey back onto film sets, but it couldn't make Marvel risk its entire future on him. By 2006, director Jon Favreau wanted him for something far bigger, the lead role in a Marvel movie called Iron Man. But Marvel's own former studio president, David Maisel, later admitted the board thought he'd lost his mind. "My board thought I was crazy," Maisel said, "to put the future of the company in the hands of an addict." They were seriously considering another actor instead, someone with zero history attached. Favreau wouldn't drop it. He pushed until the studio agreed to just one thing: let Downey do a screen test. Not a promise, just a chance. Now compare that to Tony Stark's own arc inside that cave. He walks in believing his intelligence makes him untouchable. He walks out understanding that his creations can hurt people. That surviving comes with responsibility attached. Both men had spent years unable to talk their way around the damage they'd caused. Both had to decide if survival would become just another excuse or an actual obligation to change. The role needed someone the audience could believe was both the problem and the fix. That's exactly what made Robert Downey Jr. perfect for it, and exactly what made him terrifying to hire. The test stripped everything away. No finished armor, no effects, just Downey performing Tony Stark on camera. Favreau already believed he had the role's spark. Now the footage had to convince everyone else. Downey didn't perform Tony's arrogance from the outside. He let it come from somewhere real, somewhere he clearly recognized. The test didn't make Downey look safe. It made safety look like the wrong choice. What makes the test so effective is one specific acting choice. Downey could make charm function as a defense mechanism, not just a personality trait. Tony's arrogance carried two meanings at once. On the surface it said, "I'm smarter than everyone in this room." Underneath it said, "Don't look closely enough to notice I'm scared." A safer actor might have played Tony as simply confident or simply funny. Downey played both meanings in the same line at the same time. Kevin Feige would go on to run the entire studio. He later called this casting decision one of the greatest in the history of Hollywood.
Should we talk about that? Because I think that's probably one of the greatest decisions in the history of Hollywood.
It's the kind of decision that eventually built an entire cinematic universe worth billions, one nobody could have predicted from that first quiet audition tape. Here's what made his version of Tony work once cameras rolled for real. His humor wasn't just comedy sitting on top of the character. Downey played it as distraction, as avoidance, as a test of whether anyone else in the room could keep up with him. A safer performance might have softened Tony right out of the gate, made him instantly likable. Downey didn't. In the film's early scenes, he let the character be careless, dismissive, and quietly afraid the moment nobody was watching him perform.
Yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace. Okay?
What's going on? Contact lab! What do we got?
Because the flaws felt real, the change felt real too. Iron Man released in May of 2008. A weapons manufacturer, nearly killed by his own inventions, forced to rebuild something better out of the wreckage of who he used to be. Robert Downey Jr. didn't need a workshop to understand that shape. He'd already lived a version of it. The film made roughly $585 million worldwide and became the launchpad for what we now call the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was Marvel Studios' first fully independent production. Paramount only handled distribution. Marvel itself carried the financial risk, and Kevin Feige later called the entire bet make or break for the studio. Think about that. A man once sentenced to state prison had become the foundation of a franchise built around second chances. The first Iron Man proved Robert Downey Jr. could play Tony's confidence. The decade that followed would prove he understood something far harder to fake. He understood Tony's fear. Tony Stark's real conflict was never just about villains. It was the fact that no matter how many suits he built, he could never fully build away his own fear. Watch the moment right after he first survives that cave, back home in California, alone in his workshop. He doesn't celebrate. He can't sleep. He builds a new suit obsessively, testing it in the middle of the night.
And 3, 2, 1.
Staying busy is easier than sitting still with what happened to him. That's not a training montage. That's a man avoiding his own thoughts. By Iron Man 2, that avoidance turns into something closer to self-sabotage. Tony is dying, quietly. Instead of telling the people who love him, he deflects. Jokes, reckless behavior, all of it happening at his own birthday party. Pepper calls him out, in front of everyone.
Get out.
He doesn't have a comeback ready. For a second, the performance just stops. That unraveling gets worse in Iron Man 3. After surviving New York, Tony can't sleep at all. He has panic attacks he won't name out loud.
Tony.
How did you get out of the wormhole?
Wait a minute. Sorry. Suit.
So he responds the only way he knows how. He builds dozens of suits obsessively from a workshop he barely leaves. The armor is no longer just a weapon. It has become a coping mechanism, something to build instead of something to feel. Downey never drops the jokes here. He just lets them run alongside a man quietly falling apart. That's the pattern across the whole saga. Tony jokes exactly when the truth would cost him something. In Age of Ultron, his fear of losing the people he loves pushes him to build an artificial intelligence meant to protect the world.
I'm on a mission.
What mission?
Peace in our time.
Instead, it nearly destroys it. His control wasn't strength. It was overcorrection, dressed up as strategy. That fear resurfaces again in Civil War. After the destruction in Sokovia, Tony stops trusting his own judgment completely. He backs government oversight for the Avengers.
He wanted to make a difference, I suppose. I mean, we won't know because we dropped a building on him while we were kicking ass.
He's convinced someone needs to control what he's capable of causing. Accountability is part of it. But Downey plays something else underneath it. Fear disguised as responsibility. That instinct makes Tony fiercely protective. It also pushes Steve Rogers away and splits the team apart. Tony isn't trying to control the Avengers. He's trying to control the next disaster before it happens. He can't. That failure costs him the one team he had left. Redemption in this story was never a straight line. Tony kept improving, failing, and overcorrecting, creating new problems along the way. That inconsistency is exactly what made him feel human, instead of just heroic. Every relationship in his life stripped away a different layer of armor. Pepper saw straight through the performance. Rhodey called out his recklessness to his face. A teenager named Peter Parker gave him something to mentor, instead of just protect from a distance.
This is all I have. I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it, okay?
Each of those relationships forced Tony to be seen, not just admired, which was always the harder thing for him to allow. By Endgame, Tony had spent years believing his intelligence should let him survive anything. In the final battle, he makes a different choice. He takes the hit himself, so everyone else gets to live. The line he says doing it, "I am Iron Man," is the same line he used at a press conference a decade earlier.
I am Iron Man. And I am Iron Man.
Back then, it sounded like arrogance. By the end, it means the opposite thing entirely. That final scene worked because audiences hadn't spent a decade watching a perfect hero become heroic. They'd spent a decade watching a deeply imperfect man slowly try to become responsible for something larger than himself. Off-screen, that same actor stood at the Academy Awards in March of 2024. He held his first Oscar, 32 years after that Chaplin nomination. He thanked his wife before anyone else. "She found me, a snarling rescue pet, and loved me back to life," he said. "That's why I'm here."
She found me a snarling rescue pet, and you love me back to life. That's why I'm here.
If that line got you in the chest a little, tell me in the comments. I want to know which part of this one hit hardest. Robert Downey Jr. didn't make Tony Stark real because their lives were identical. They weren't. He never ran a weapons company. He never built a flying suit. He made Tony real because he understood the contradiction the character was built from. Confidence that hides fear, humor that shuts down an honest conversation before it starts. Damage that doesn't just disappear the moment someone decides to change. Most of all, he understood that a second chance doesn't erase the past. It just hands you the responsibility of choosing what happens next. Tony Stark started out believing his armor made him powerful. By the end, he'd learned it was the thing keeping everyone else at a distance. So yeah, no wonder Tony Stark felt so real. That's Robert Downey Jr.'s real origin story, and it's better than anything Marvel could have scripted. If stories like this are your thing, subscribe. We've got more people like him coming.